Neglectful dad and evil stepmom tried to kick me out of my own house to give it to my spoiled, pregnant stepsister because her boyfriend left her and she has nothing. But when I refused to play along, I uncovered a secret so devastating it didn't just destroy my family. It exposed a lie that had been eating us alive for 3 decades. Before I go any further, drop a comment right now and tell me, where are you watching from? Because I need to know I'm not alone in thinking what happened next is absolutely insane. Let me start from the beginning. I'm 34 years old, a financial analyst who clawed his way up from nothing. I manage investment portfolios during the day and run a few small businesses on the side. Every dollar I've earned came from my own sweat. No handouts. No trust fund. Just me, starting at 15, working every job I could find to survive. Last month, I finally bought my dream house, a modest 3-bedroom place with hardwood floors and a backyard I'd always imagined having. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. Completely, legally, undeniably mine. I decided to throw a housewarming party. I invited my colleagues, my boss, a few close friends. And because I'm not a complete monster, I invited my family too. My father, who's 62 now. My stepmother Victoria. And my half-sister Celeste, who's 29 and has never worked a real day in her life. The moment my father walked through the front door, I should have known something was wrong. He didn't smile. Didn't congratulate me. Instead, he walked slowly through each room, running his fingers along the furniture, inspecting the crown molding like he was appraising the place for auction. He stopped in the kitchen, stared at the stainless steel appliances, and asked in this tight voice, "So how much did this all cost you?" I told him it wasn't about the cost, it was about finally having something that belonged to me. He didn't respond. Just looked at Victoria, who was standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, giving me this cold, calculating stare. Celeste barely acknowledged me at all. She sat on my new couch scrolling through her phone, not even pretending to care. My boss was standing right there. My colleagues were in the next room. And my father chose that exact moment to say, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Must be nice having all this space just for yourself. Tell me, did mommy's insurance money help pay for it?" The room went silent. I felt my face flush. My mother died when I was 5 years old in a car accident. There was no insurance money. She died broke, and my father knew that. He was trying to humiliate me in front of everyone I respected. I forced a smile and said, "I worked for this, Dad. Every square foot." He made this dismissive sound in his throat, like a low grunt, and said, "We'll see how long you keep it." I didn't understand what he meant. Not yet. But I would. 1 week later, my phone rang. It was my father, and his voice was ice cold. "We need to talk. Now. It's about family." That tone told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a request. It was a summons. I drove to his house that evening, my stomach tight with dread. When I walked in, Celeste was sitting on the couch, her eyes red and swollen like she'd been crying for hours. Victoria sat next to her, arms crossed, glaring at me like I'd personally wronged her. My father was in the kitchen, pulling bottles of beer from the fridge. He offered me one. I declined. Something about the whole scene felt like a trap, and I wanted to stay sharp. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. He sat down across from me, leaned back in his chair, and stared at me for a long, uncomfortable moment. Then he said, "Are you blind, or do you just not care about your family?" I frowned. "What are you talking about?" He gestured toward Celeste, who was now sobbing into her hands. "Your sister is pregnant. Her boyfriend abandoned her. She has nowhere to go and no way to support herself. And you," he pointed at me, his fingers shaking with anger, "you just bought a 3-bedroom house and didn't even think to offer her a place to stay." I blinked, trying to process what I was hearing. "Dad, I can help her out financially if she needs it. She can even stay in one of the spare rooms rent-free until she gets on her feet." Nonsense. He slammed his hand on the armrest. "She doesn't need a room. She needs the whole house. You're giving her your house." I actually laughed. I thought he was joking. But when I looked at his face, I realized he was dead serious. And worse, Celeste wasn't surprised. She'd been expecting this. This was planned. My father continued, his voice low and venomous. "You'll buy yourself another place. You're doing well for yourself, aren't you? You can afford it. Celeste is pregnant and alone. She needs a safe space for her and the baby. You're her brother. Brothers give their lives for their sisters. Didn't your mother teach you that?" The mention of my mother made something inside me snap. I stood up, my hands shaking. "I can help with money, Dad. I can let her stay in a room. But I'm not giving her my house." Victoria spoke for the first time, her voice dripping with contempt. "You're selfish. Just like your mother." I turned to leave. My father didn't try to stop me. But as I reached the door, he called out, "You'll regret this." Family always comes first, whether you like it or not. I didn't respond. I just walked out, got in my car, and drove home. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. 1 week later, I came home from work to find a moving truck parked outside my house. Not just any truck, a full-size moving van with 2 men carrying boxes out of my front door. My boxes. My belongings. My life being loaded onto a truck like garbage headed for the dump. I ran inside, my heart pounding. My father and Celeste were standing in my living room like they owned the place. Celeste had her arms crossed, looking smug. My father turned to me and said, calm as anything, you had your chance to do this the easy way. I couldn't breathe. How did you get in here? Where did you get keys? He didn't answer. One of the movers walked past me carrying a box labeled, trash. Inside were my college diplomas. My awards. My framed photographs. Everything that mattered to me, being thrown out like it meant nothing. I shouted at the movers to stop. Told them I was the homeowner and they needed to put everything back immediately. One of them looked at me with pity and said, sorry, man. Boss said you're being evicted. I turned to my father, rage boiling over. I am the owner. Get out of my house. He shrugged. Don't make a scene, son. Celeste needs this more than you do. You're young. You'll bounce back. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. That finally got his attention. He motioned to Celeste, and they walked toward the door. But before leaving, he stopped, looked me dead in the eye, and said, you're selfish. Just like your mother. That was the moment I decided I wasn't just going to protect my house. I was going to find out what they were hiding. Because people don't act this desperate unless they're covering something up. The next morning, I sat in a private investigator's office. The guy across from me was in his 50s, graying at the temples, with the kind of face that had seen everything twice. I slid a photo of Victoria across his desk. I need you to follow her. He picked up the photo, studied it. What am I looking for? She says she goes to yoga class every day. Even Sundays. I want to know if that's true. He nodded slowly, a knowing look in his eyes. How deep do you want me to dig? All the way down. He smiled. You must really hate her. I corrected him. I don't know her well enough to hate her. But I'm about to. He said it would take 2 weeks. I told him I'd pay double if he could do it in 1. He took the case. While I waited for the PI's report, I decided to reach out to Celeste. I texted her and asked if we could meet for coffee. To my surprise, she agreed. We met at a small cafe near her apartment. She looked different, nervous, fidgeting with her napkin, avoiding eye contact. Normally, Celeste was arrogant and loud. But today, she seemed small. She started crying almost immediately. Told me her boyfriend Dylan had left her. I told her I already knew that, Dad had mentioned it. She shook her head. That's not the whole story. I leaned forward. Then tell me the whole story. She hesitated, then the words came tumbling out. She'd been escorting. Selling her time to older men for money. She also had an OnlyFans account that barely made anything because she didn't know how to market herself. Dylan had found out about all of it. When she told him she was pregnant, he lost it. Punched a hole in the wall. Told her he never wanted to see her again. I felt disgust rise in my throat, but I kept my face neutral. And the baby? Is it Dylan's? She looked down. I don't know. It could be his. It could be someone else's. I took a breath. This was worse than I thought. But then she said something that made my ears perk up. At least Mom can't judge me for my choices. I frowned. What do you mean? Her face went pale. Nothing. Forget I said that. Celeste. I leaned in closer. What did you mean by that? She shook her head, standing up. I can't talk about this. She'll destroy me. I grabbed her wrist gently. She already destroyed you, Celeste. Tell me the truth. She pulled away and left without another word. But she'd given me exactly what I needed. A thread to pull. 3 days later, my phone buzzed. It was the PI. I've got something. You need to see this. I met him at his office. He handed me a thick manila envelope. Inside were 47 photographs. I only needed to see 3. Photo 1, Victoria standing in a parking garage, her hand on the chest of a silver-haired man in an expensive suit. She was laughing. I'd never seen her laugh like that with my father. Photo 2, the same man opening a car door for her. Kissing her. His hand on her lower back. Photo 3, them entering a luxury condo together. The timestamp read 3:15 in the afternoon. Right when she was supposed to be at yoga. The PI slid a document across the desk. His name is Marcus Whitmore. 61 years old. CEO of Whitmore Manufacturing. Widower. Very wealthy. And here's where it gets interesting. He pulled up an old archived news article on his laptop. This guy was married 30 years ago. Back when your stepmother was in her mid-20s. I cross-referenced some old social circles. They knew each other. My blood ran cold. How long has this affair been going on? At least 3 years, based on financial records. She's been receiving $4,800 a month from a shell company he owns. Payments started 3 years ago and haven't stopped. I stared at the photos. My father had been cheated on for 3 years and had no idea. But something about the timeline didn't add up. If Victoria knew Marcus 30 years ago, and Celeste was 29. I needed to talk to Celeste again. This time, I wasn't asking. I was demanding answers. I showed up at her apartment unannounced. When she opened the door, I held up the photo of Marcus. "Who is this?" Her face crumbled. She tried to close the door, but I stopped it with my foot. "Celeste. Who is Marcus Whitmore?" She started sobbing. I walked inside and closed the door behind me. We sat on her couch, and she told me everything. Victoria and Marcus had been in love 30 years ago. He was married to a woman whose father owned the company Marcus now runs. There was no way he could leave without losing everything, his job, his reputation, his future. But Victoria got pregnant. With his baby. That baby was Celeste. Victoria panicked. She couldn't raise a child alone. So she seduced my father, who was vulnerable after his divorce from my mother. She told him she was pregnant with his child. My father, being the traditional man he was, married her immediately. He believed Celeste was his daughter. He raised her. Paid for everything. Loved her. But it was all a lie. Marcus's wife died 5 years ago. He finally had his freedom. 3 years ago, he and Victoria reconnected. They've been planning her exit ever since. She was just waiting for the right moment to divorce my father and run off with Marcus. I sat there, stunned. My father had been living a lie for 29 years. And Celeste had known the truth for the past 2 years. Victoria had told her and made her promise never to say anything. I looked at Celeste. "Does Dad know?" She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "No. And Marcus doesn't want anyone to know either. It would be bad for his business." I stood up. "So you've just been lying to him? Letting him pay for everything? Letting him think you're his daughter?" She didn't answer. She just cried. I left her apartment and sat in my car, my mind racing. I could tell my father the truth. But would he even believe me? He'd always chosen Victoria over me. Always. If I accused her of cheating without proof, he'd just think I was trying to sabotage their marriage out of spite. No. I needed to show him. And I needed to do it in a way he couldn't deny. I spent the next 2 days researching Marcus Whitmore. Found out he had a weekly routine. Every Thursday night, he went to an upscale sports bar called Riverside for their Scotch Club. High-end clientele. Lots of business networking. Perfect. I called my father. Told him I wanted to meet for drinks. That I'd been thinking about the house situation and maybe we could find a compromise. He sounded surprised, but hopeful. He agreed immediately. I told him to meet me at Riverside Bar on Thursday at 7. He said he'd be there. Then I went to the bar 2 days early and talked to the bartender. Slipped him $500 in cash. Told him I needed a favor. When Marcus Whitmore came in on Thursday, I needed to be seated right next to him. The bartender looked at the cash, looked at me, and nodded. Thursday night came. I arrived 15 minutes early. My father showed up right on time, wearing a button-down shirt and slacks. He looked almost excited, like he thought I was finally coming around. We sat at the bar. Ordered drinks. Made small talk about work. Then, 20 minutes later, the door opened. Marcus Whitmore walked in, silver hair perfectly styled, expensive watch glinting under the lights. He sat down on the stool right next to us, exactly as planned. My father had no idea who he was. I let a few minutes pass. Let Marcus order his scotch. Then I turned to my father and said, loud enough for Marcus to hear, "Dad, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered if Victoria's been faithful to you?" My father's face flushed. "What kind of question is that?" I looked directly at Marcus. "Because the man sitting next to you has been sleeping with your wife for 3 years." The bar went quiet. Marcus's face turned white. My father looked confused, then angry. "What the hell are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone. Turned to the bartender. "Hey, can you put this on the screens?" The bartender nodded. Within seconds, every TV screen in the bar was displaying the photos. Victoria and Marcus kissing. Entering hotels. Holding hands at restaurants. All time-stamped. All dated. My father stood up so fast his stool fell over. He stared at the screens, his mouth open, his hands shaking. What is this?" I pulled up the archived news article on my phone. Showed him the headline. "This is Marcus Whitmore. He was married 30 years ago. And he was having an affair with Victoria back then, too." Marcus tried to stand up and leave. I blocked his path. Tell him who Celeste's real father is. Marcus said nothing. So I said it for him. You got Victoria pregnant 29 years ago, and she pinned it on my father. My father turned to Marcus, his voice barely a whisper. Is this true? Marcus could have lied. Could have denied it. But instead, he threw Victoria under the bus. She was supposed to wait for me. I told her to wait until I was ready. But she got impatient. This was her choice, not mine. Before my father could respond, the bartender spoke up. I'm Dylan. Celeste's ex-boyfriend. And she's exactly like her mother, a liar and a cheat. My father looked at me, his face pale. You knew about this? For about a week, I said. I wanted you to hear it from them. Then my phone rang. I looked at the screen. It was Victoria. I put it on speaker. Where are you? She asked, her voice tight. You were supposed to be home an hour ago. My father's voice cut through the noise of the bar. I'm at Riverside Bar, Victoria. With our son. And Marcus Whitmore. There was a long silence on the other end. Then the line went dead. The next morning, Victoria showed up at my house. She looked like she hadn't slept. No makeup. Hair a mess. Still wearing the same clothes from the day before. She didn't even wait for me to invite her in, she just pushed past me into the living room. You need to delete those photos, she said, her voice shaking. Right now. I crossed my arms. Why would I do that? Because you've ruined my life, she screamed. Your father froze all the bank accounts. He's filing for divorce. Marcus won't even take my calls. His lawyers told him to deny everything because it would hurt his business. I have nothing. Nothing. I looked at her, this woman who had controlled everything for so long, now completely powerless. Your kid, your problem, I said. Her face twisted in rage. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won? I'm not trying to win, Victoria. I'm just trying to keep what's mine. She grabbed my sleeve, desperate now. Please. Think about Celeste. She's pregnant. She needs help. I pulled my arm away. She made her choices. You made yours. Now live with them. I walked to the door and opened it. She stood there for a moment, tears running down her face, then finally left. I watched through the window as she sat in her car for 20 minutes, sobbing into her hands. Then she drove away. I never saw her again. 2 days later, Celeste called me, screaming. Marcus had refused to acknowledge her as his daughter. A paternity test confirmed he was her biological father, but his lawyers sent a letter denying any relationship. Going public with a 30-year affair and a secret child would destroy his company's reputation. He didn't care about her. He never had. You ruined everything. Celeste shouted through the phone. I had a plan. I was going to be taken care of. And you destroyed it. I let her scream. Let her get it all out. When she finally went quiet, I said, you ruined it yourself by lying, Celeste. You knew the truth for 2 years and said nothing. That's on you. She hung up. 2 months later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that she'd moved to another state. She and Victoria were living in a women's shelter temporarily, then found a small apartment. No contact with my father. No contact with Marcus. Completely alone. Marcus Whitmore's affair became public through my father's divorce proceedings. His company's stock dropped 6%. The board pressured him to step back from public appearances. His reputation, built over decades, was tarnished in a matter of weeks. I didn't feel bad for him. Not even a little. 3 months after everything exploded, my father called me. Asked if we could meet for coffee. I almost said no. But something in his voice made me agree. We met at a small diner on the edge of town. He looked older. Grayer. The kind of aging that happens when you're forced to face truths you've been avoiding your whole life. We sat across from each other in a cracked vinyl booth, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said, I owe you an apology. I didn't respond. Just waited. I owe you an apology for the house. For trying to force you to give it up. For choosing Victoria over you, over and over again, for 30 years. For sending you to boarding school when you were 8 because she didn't want you around. For believing her lies. For being a coward. His voice cracked on that last word. I looked down at my coffee. I've been going to therapy, he continued. Trying to figure out how I let this happen. How I became the kind of man who would abandon his own son for a woman who was using me the whole time. He paused. Took a shaky breath. Can we try again? Slowly? I looked up at him. Saw the pain in his eyes. The regret. And I realized something. Holding on to anger wasn't protecting me. It was just weighing me down. 1 dinner a month, I said. We'll see where it goes. He nodded, relief flooding his face. I'll take it. As we left the diner, he put his hand on my shoulder. I didn't pull away. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was a start. Now, 6 months later, I'm still living in my house. My father sold the home he'd shared with Victoria and downsized to a small condo. We've had 6 monthly dinners now. They're still awkward sometimes, but they're getting easier. He's working on himself in therapy, trying to become the father he should have been. Dylan, the bartender, and I became unlikely friends. We meet for drinks occasionally, and he told me he feels vindicated knowing the truth finally came out. As for me? I sleep well at night knowing I didn't just protect what was mine. I freed my father from a 30-year lie. I held my boundaries. I refused to be manipulated. And I proved that the truth, no matter how ugly, is always better than a beautiful lie. People ask me if I regret exposing everything. The answer is no. Because standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary. And sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for someone you love is show them the truth, even when it destroys them. If you made it this far, thank you for listening. Hit that like button if you think I did the right thing. And comment below, have you ever had to expose a family secret? What happened? I'll be reading every one. See you in the next story.